coronavirus.
This astounding and unprecedented story continues to evolve. The NBA is suspending the season.
This is crazy. This can't be true. This just seems more like out of a movie than reality.
This is the last night of NBA games for the foreseeable future.
Good morning and welcome into First Take. Thank you so much for being with us. We are navigating uncharted territory as the NBA suspends the season until further notice after a player tested positive for coronavirus. Our Adrian Wojnarowski identified the player as Utah Jazz center Rudy Gobert, who tested positive Wednesday for the virus. The NBA announcing that a player on the Utah Jazz has preliminarily tested positive for COVID-19. The test result was reported shortly prior to the tip-off of tonight's game between the Jazz and Oklahoma City Thunder at Chesapeake Energy Arena. At that time, tonight's game was canceled. The affected player was not in the arena. The NBA is suspending gameplay following the conclusion of tonight's schedule of games until further notice. The NBA will use this hiatus to determine next steps for moving forward in regard to the coronavirus pandemic. Players the Jazz have faced within the past 10 days, including the teams you are seeing listed here, are being told to self-quarantine, a source telling our Brian Windhorst, who will be with us momentarily. And now we welcome in Mike Greenberg. And good morning, Stephen A. Max, I'm Molly Karen Rose. Wow. This has been a crazy couple days. And obviously, Stephen A., not just the fact that games have been suspended, the NBA has suspended the season, but the fact that it has been deemed a pandemic. What was your reaction to the news as this came down last night?
Well, because the World Health Organization came out and it labeled it and deemed it a pandemic, I knew, and I was far from shocked or surprised when I learned that the season would be suspended. The second you heard that Rudy Gobert had tested positive, and a dear friend of mine had called me last night because I was driving. I was en route to Long Island after I had hosted, the Sports Center show. And she called me to tell me, look, they just stopped the game. He said the game's not even starting. They're saying that Rudy Gobert and several other players may have been ill, and then it was announced that Rudy Gobert had the coronavirus. And the second that happened, I knew that within the hour, the season would be suspended. Because if you're the National Basketball Association, what is your nightmare? That a player has contracted the virus and he has been around other players and obviously players being around their family and what have you. And this is what the deal is. I mean, ultimately, it's going to spread. And so you had to neutralize that to the best of your ability as immediately as you possibly could. I love the fact that they used the word suspended as opposed to cancel, because that gives you hope that ultimately the games will resume. That means folks are confident that they're working on obviously, finding a cure and obviously addressing the situation with the expediency that it deserves. And we'll see what happens in that regard. But ultimately, I'm not surprised at all. It was the right move by the NBA to act as swiftly as they possibly could. Utah was held in OKC at the arena for about 5 hours, if I remember correctly, before they were granted a hotel in OKC or what have you. I think that everything that could have been done in the moment has been done. They'll continue to put forth their due diligence, but I don't think anyone can argue with the decision that was made. The only thing that I'll say that jumped out at me is that I don't want anybody to attach malice intent on a part of Rudy Gobert, who was playing around, touching the microphones and tape recorders and all that stuff. But it was still, he needs to understand it was incredibly irresponsible for him to play around like that to begin with. And that video is going to be shown all over the world over the next couple of days or so, him touching microphones and tape recorders of the media, playing around and stuff like that. He didn't take it seriously. I assure you, everybody's taking it seriously.
There's been a lot of that in this country, as a matter of fact. Forget about Gobert for a second, who did it, and it was stupid. People who were at first saying it was a hoax as a result of some very bad and disingenuous media coverage early on and making it a point to shake hands with other people to show how unconcerned they were. Gobert and everyone else, and even people who wear masks, that's really not about not getting it yourself so much as it's about not spreading it. It's you don't want to overtax the healthcare system. That's when things get dangerous. My reaction when I heard the news from the NBA was, of course, Adam Silver is out in front of it, just as he was when Donald Sterling made those despicable remarks. He got rid of him, just as he was when China tried to dictate speech policy to the NBA. He stood up. And I'm not claiming that that's the first thing he did, right? Because, of course, every business tries to protect its bottom line. So the first thing you do is not cancel everything and give back all the money. It's the last thing you want to do. So there were intermediate steps, even in the China situation, where there was a little hesitation. How are we going to handle this? But then he came down on the right side, and he's done it again. Rather than wait, and Wendy, you brought it up yesterday when I said they're going to be playing in front of empty arenas. He said as soon as one person tests positive, they have to suspend play, which is exactly what happened because of the contagion, because you have to quarantine them. And Adam Silver is out in front of it. Mark Emmert and others are lagging behind. And this is instructive because there are powerful economic or financial incentives, to look out only for your short-term interest. And in our world, that means this news cycle, But Adam Silver had the foresight to do the right thing, and the NBA is leading the way as usual.
Well, usually I love coming in here because I get to give my strong opinion on things, but today I will cede my opinion to our mutual friend Charles Barkley, who was on Get Up with us in our first hour today and went off. I mean off. And remember, bear in mind, he is in the studio, Steve, as you well know, for CBS and Turner as they do the NCAA tournament. And he said in no uncertain terms that those games should not be played. But I will point out that as of now, and John Swofford, the commissioner of the ACC, was on ACC Network this morning and said the games will be played today. They'll be played in front of mostly empty arenas. I believe they're in Charlotte. They will be played. Each team gets 150 tickets, so there'll be very limited people in the stands, but those games will be played. The Players' Championship, golf, they're playing right now. Spectators are there. They're on the course as we speak in Ponte Vedra, Florida. Baseball spring training games are being played today in front of fans in both Florida and Arizona. So the NBA has made this move, but they are, at this point, the only league in this country that has completely suspended what they're doing.
Yesterday, we were talking about the Ivy League. The Ivy League, as is usually the case, was smarter than everybody else. They shut down. And I want to commend the APT Tour because they shut down Indian Wells and they shut down their league going forward. They were ahead of this. And that's why I'm stunned the PGA Tour, which is comparable to the ATP Tour in terms of their universal and international field. I mean, we've been showing this video of Phil Mickelson practicing on the range this morning. His caddy sneezes right in front of it. And it's not that I think the caddy has coronavirus. It's that you're bringing all these people together. So I would encourage, number one, leadership from the people who are in sports. I thought Mark Cuban showed incredible leadership last night when this chaos was going on, standing in front of the cameras and making a statement on behalf of the NBA about what was going to happen and what was going to be done. He then came on Get Up this morning and showed more leadership. I appreciate the NBA, who I thought was a little bit sluggish in not immediately banning all fans from the arenas. We saw individual teams make very strange statements. The Cavs saying that their air handlers at their arena could clear out the air. We saw the Wizards defy the D.C. mayor's order. We saw the conference call come and go and no issue. But they did have testing measures in place so that Gobert could get tested. And as soon as he was able to get the result, they were able to pull the plug. I encourage everybody else who is in a position of leadership in sports to show the leadership and do the correct thing, which is to be on the right side of history and suspend things that are going on, and we will come back and finish it later.
Which is why we should have an extremely huge problem with the ACC still having their tournament and with the NCAA overall, who hasn't canceled anything. I can't explain enough. I almost shake when I think about the NCAA and their exploitive tendencies that we have lamented for decades. And here you are with institutions of higher learning closing their schools, but somehow, some way, you still won't stop your basketball tournament from taking place. The ACC, you talk about just 150 people or whatever the case may be. Here's the reality of the situation. Max and I have talked about this over the air on several occasions over the last few days. They talk about, 10 days to 2 weeks before you even know, before you even have any symptoms.
Between 5 and 14 days where you don't show symptoms.
Yeah.
That's right, between 5 and 14 days. So again, if you don't show symptoms, how would you know? And then you're talking about the players and you're talking about the 150 people in attendance. When they leave the arena, who the hell are they communicating with? You don't know this. The fact that we're still learning so much. I don't care if you allow 10 people in the arena. You should do everything you can to refrain from that level of participation. And oh, by the way, the athletes themselves, if we got to worry about shaking hands with folks or people sneezing in our vicinity, what about the athletes who are breaking a sweat, competing against one another, banging bodies, swapping sweat, for crying out loud, and all of this other stuff? What about that? How do you not take that into consideration when it comes to athletics?
Just in terms of a numbers
It's
game,
inexcusable.
we have
It's
players
inexcusable.
from all over the country, the personnel.
Congressional doctor yesterday, I believe it was, predicted that between 70 and 150 million Americans are going to get the coronavirus. In other words, almost, more than half the country is going to have it. The issue is not whether or not people will get it. It's an infectious disease. It's asymptomatic early on. It spreads very easily. The issue is, the point of social distancing is to slow the spread,
right,
so that everyone doesn't get it all at once. That's when the most vulnerable are even more vulnerable. That's why, if people say, well, if everyone's going to get it anyway, that's why you don't convene 20,000 people in the same place at the same time. Why lower numbers are better. Why I originally thought maybe they can do it in an empty gym. Because with training staffs and everything, 50 people get together, it's okay. But once